people's question, can I finish this race? Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no reason not to finish this race because we know, because we've proved it so many times, we've seen it repeatedly over and over, that inside each and every one of us, inside is an inexhaustible well of grit, guts, and determination.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race. Thanks for finding our show, the one that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest and arguably the hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. On the show this week, we have questions for the Queen of Pain, that is. We begin our mile-by-mile weekly course segment with the starting line strategies. And Trainer Road's Jonathan Lee checks in with training trips for the LT100. Our big feature this week is the question that keeps every Leadville racer up at night. Can I finish this darn thing? Founder Ken Chlouber weighs in with his perspective. I'm Michael Hottie. Some people call me Hottie, a nickname that I did not choose. It was simply attached without authorization. I'm here with another nicknamed bike freak, Eldon Fatty Nelson, the guy who so desperately wanted to lose weight, he picked a name of shame, Fatty. Now, Fatty, if I were to pick a nickname for myself, especially as it relates to this show, this event, it would be 654. That's for 6-time attendee, 5-time starter, 4-time finisher of the Leadville Trail 100. Basically, my LT 100 Palmares. You like that?
Well, of course I like it, but I have two things to say on that, Hottie. First of all, once you've got a nickname, there's nothing you can do about it. I do like 654, but I think I'd add a 1 to that nickname because you've finished under 9 hours once, haven't you?
Once, yeah.
That is a big deal. Sub 9 is not something to scoff at. I worked for 15 years before I got that sub 9. And as long as we're doing numbers, let me lay out my Leadville 100 history in numbers. I've raced the Leadville 100 21 times and have finished it 20 times, so we've each had one miss. I'm one of only 8 people who has finished 20 times, so I have that 20 finish buckle. I finished as slow as 11 hours, 27 minutes and as fast as 8 hours and 12 minutes. And I have actually been on the top podium in Leadville. I was the men's single speed champion in 2012. So basically the Leadville 100 is a 2-decade full-blown, full family obsession for me. And if there's ever been a podcast I've been born to do, this is it.
Yeah, and my only problem with all your numbers there, Fatty, is it's hard to get on a T-shirt. See, 654, that goes on hats and T-shirts, and then we sell that stuff.
That would fit on a race plate.
I know.
I do tend to be long-winded. You're going to have to shut me down from time to time.
All right, the Leadville podcast is brought to you by our good friends at Shimano, Fatty.
That's right. Specifically, the Shimano XT Di2 group set. Hottie, which bike do you think I am racing Leadville with this year? My Specialized Epic full suspension bike or my Felt Doctrine hardtail?
Well, I know which of the two is your new love because I've heard a lot about this bike. So I'm going to guess it's the full suspension, the Specialized Epic.
That's right. I've been talking a lot about that Epic, but I'm also, and you don't know about this, I am building up a Doctrine right now. So you might be right. It might be the Epic, but it's a trick question because I have not personally decided yet. But whatever I ride, I will be riding with Shimano XT Di2. That's what I'm going to have on both of these bikes. My fastest time at Leadville was with Di2. And when you're changing gears a lot, like when you're going up Columbine or down Columbine, or when you're going up Powerline and it rolls and it gets real hard and then real easy, frankly, anywhere on this course, good shifts, fast shifts, easy shifts matter. In my humble opinion, Di2 is the fastest, cleanest, bestest shifting you can possibly have.
Yeah, I don't own any Di2, but I've been on it, the mountain stuff. I've been on the road stuff too, but the mountain stuff in particular, spent a couple of weeks on a test bike with Di. And Fatty, I'll have to say, I shifted so much and so often, I just started, the people around me were getting annoyed. Stop it, Hottie. I was like, watch this shift. Watch my synchro shifting. They didn't know what that was, of course, but they're like, okay, we get it. It's amazing stuff. It works very well. And with a brand like Shimano, I mean, these guys get it right. They may not always be first with technologies, but when they do put stuff out there, they get it right. Now, Di2, they were number one. These guys are the leaders. And I can't say enough about Di2. If that is your package, if that is your deal, you're going to be really happy about it. Go to bikeshimano.com. That's bike.shimano.com for more on that. And we'll also have a link at Leadville100podcast.com, our home site. And now, Fatty, onto the course, a very important part of the Leadville Trail 100. There's actually a course out there. Each week, we're going to discuss a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We'll do this in order. If you are new to the race, or if you've messed it up in the past, you'll find answers here in this segment. If you're an LT100 vet, you can blast our takes on our website, Leadville100podcast.com. Tweet with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or text or leave us a voicemail. We have a phone number for this podcast.
Heck
it's
yeah.
719-453-1514. You went through great lengths, I think, Fatty, to get a phone line for us. That's perfect.
Oh, yeah, a Leadville phone number.
Yeah, that's a 719 area code, right? That you'll find that right at somewhere in downtown Leadville, that area.
I spared no expense for this podcast. I think it cost me $4.
Well, this is episode 1. So, of course, Fatty, we begin the course with the start line.
That's right. This starting line is an amazing part of this race. And so while we, in this episode of the course, will not move a single inch, we're going to make a lot of progress on the race from the bed to the starting line. There's a lot to talk about here, so it's going to be a little bit of a lightning round. But here's what I want to start with. The night before, do you have a list that you have checked off everything so that you have everything ready to go? Make yourself a list. Start it now. Stuff that you care about for your bike, stuff that you want to eat, all of the things that you care about. Get that done. Next, what time are you going to get up? You've done this race a half a dozen. Well, yeah, you've been there. You've started 5 times. What time do you get up, Hottie?
Earlier than you, actually, 3 or 3:30. I think when I paced a guy twice, and he liked to get to the start line really early. So I think our wake up call was like 3:15 or something like that.
That's very early in the morning, but that is the reality. Get up super early. Give yourself plenty of time for your first coffee, and then your first breakfast, your first poop, because we're dropping all filters here, right? Mm-hmm. All the last minute bike stuff. Last year, if I would have given my bike a final last minute once over, who knows, I might have saved half an hour off of the mechanical that I found myself with 15 minutes into the race.
Was that the seat mechanical?
Yep,
that mechanical?
My saddle rail. It broke in the first, before I even hit dirt. Very good chance that it was broken when I started the race and just didn't feel it until I started hitting bumps. Should have done that one last minute check. So take care of all of that the night before, or when you first get up. Have checklists that you get through. Give yourself plenty of time. This is not the day that you want to rush and find yourself first thing in the morning with a flat tire. No time to fix it, right? Next thing, and I think this is super important, what are you going to have for breakfast? And in my humble opinion, there is one correct answer, and that is whatever you've been having before your long rides the whole season. It's not time to experiment with something new because some know-it-all like me tells you that it works for him. My scrambled egg burrito won't necessarily work for you the way it works for me. And if you've been eating oatmeal the whole season and I never eat it, I think oatmeal, wow, all that fiber, crazy idea. But if it works for you, awesome. So
It does work. It does work for me.
Yeah.
That's why I make, but like you, Fatty, preparing the night before, I make it the night before because I use steel cutouts.
Oh.
So I just make it the night before, and then it's ready to go in the morning. I don't have to fuss over the stove or anything. Just heat it up, go.
yeah, I'm a huge fan of steel cutouts. And I have no diss for anything anyone uses. My sole point is it's what you've been using that you've gotten comfortable with, that your GI system is 100% okay with, because this is not, trust me, the day you want to have a gurgly stomach at the starting line, right? So what time do you get to the start line?
It has varied. I mean, as I've gotten more confident with what I'm doing there, I've pushed it to, and as my corral positions improved, and once I started doing corrals for that matter, I think I am more comfortable getting there at 5:45, maybe closer to 6, depending on the bathroom situation. My first time, there were no corrals, and, you just basically tried to get there as early as you could, 5:20 or so you could be up, hopefully, on the other side of Harrison Street there. But now they have corrals, and it's much easier. So I can push it to 6. I think I did 6:10 this past effort, and that was fine. I was, I was in good shape.
You are a bolder man than I am. I have been in the Silver Corral for a couple of times, and even so, I am, and that's a second corral back, and even so, I'm getting there around 5:45. I'm a very nervous person, and I know that I am going to need to use the bathroom at least once or twice more times, and it doesn't matter whether I get there 20 minutes or half an hour before the race begins. I got to go again. So whatever you do, don't get there at 6:20. It is going to be so packed and so crazy, and the line goes, no lie, 2 blocks plus back. Get there in the 5s is what I would say. I target 5:30, right?
While you're on the restroom subject, this is something people really do need to think about too. I have found that the availability of restrooms has improved especially in recent years. Like they spread out the porta potties pretty good from front of the race all the way to the back. Is that what you found?
It's not too bad. I honestly have not checked a lot of times because for the last several years, I've always taken care to reserve the place where I'm going to be staying, which is within a block of the starting line, a year ahead. So I've been staying really close. I haven't been using those porta potties. The important thing I would say to someone who is new to the race is the day before the race, when you're doing packet pickup, find out where those porta potties are and maybe where some of the less obvious ones are so that the line you're going to get in is a little bit shorter. Right? Not a bad idea. So a question that I think is worth considering is you're getting there, say 5:45, 6, whatever you decide is the right time to do. You are going to be standing in place for 45 minutes to a half hour. It's at 10,000 feet, 6 in the morning. It is cold, sometimes very cold. What are you going to be wearing while you are standing in line? Do you have a strategy on that? I certainly do.
Yep. Mine is layers. I have a pair of very thin, like sweat-type pants that go over my kit or my bike shorts. Then I have another shell type of, zipper-type pants where you can zip the legs off. Those go over the sweatpants. On top, depending on how cold it is, I might have some type of thin fleece over my jersey and arm warmers, and then an outer jacket of some sort as well. So I wrap myself up, and as I feel like I'm getting warm or whatever, too warm, I can start peeling some of those layers off and handing them to whoever my feeder might be for the day.
That is a great idea. Layers always make sense. I mean, there's nothing wrong at all with doing layers through the whole race, right? You're going to be peeling stuff off as the day warms up. For myself, I am such a huge fan of thrift store sweats and coats. A couple of weeks before the race, go to a thrift store, get yourself some sweats with a zippered leg, or just go ahead and cut up the cuff a little bit, and a super cheap jacket. I have a big white fleecy thing that I got about 5 years ago. Every year I toss it off to the side just expecting someone to throw it away. Somehow for the last 5 years it has found its way back to me every single year. I think nobody wants it. is why. But yeah, have something, whatever way you're going to go, have something to keep you warm while you are standing in line so that you're not spending the first half hour before the race shivering and wasting energy. So that makes a big difference. Next, is your GPS set up for the day? Make sure that the thing is charged and works the night before, right? And that it is set up to work for you the way that you like it for a big, long day on the bike. Let me suggest that you do not have your heart rate showing, even if you are using a heart rate monitor, because your heart rate is not your friend and will tell you lies during this race.
Mm-hmm. For GPS, I go with a very simple screen setup.
Me too.
I don't need mileage. I know how long the race is. I do like heart rate because I want to know how hard I'm working on a particular climb or in a particular section. I generally will put speed up so I can tell what my pacing is like. So heart rate and speed, that's about all I need. That way I get two big screens. I know how high I'm going to climb in the race. I know how far it is. All I want to know is how hard am I working and how fast am I going. That's all I really need to know.
I have neither of those things on. The two things that I care about are time and distance. And those are the only things that I care about. How long have I been going and how far have I gone? My heart rate, I do not want to know what it is because at 10,000 feet, it tells me different things than what it tells me at 5,000 feet where I live. We'll talk more about GPSs another time. That is, I can tell that is a topic that we might want to deep dive on at some point. But I think we do agree that you want to have very few items on there. You are going to be race stupid during this thing. And a lot of numbers on your screen are just going to look like Greek numbers that don't matter, don't help you. And plus, of course, you're rattling around the whole day. So final thing that I want to say before we move on to a different topic is, what are you going to do while you wait in line? First of all, find a buddy, make a friend, because that person can hold your bike while you go use the bathroom one last time. And then you can, of course, do the same thing for that person. Work together, make a friend. You guys have somehow wound up in the same place at the same time after training the whole summer. Get to know each other a little bit. And then the last thing, and I think this is the most important, eat something. I think you and I both love the salted caramel bonk breaker bars. That's 200 something calories before you start riding your bike. You're not going to, it's so tight and so packed for the first half hour while you're riding, you're not going to be able to eat. Start fueling before the race even begins.
Yeah, of course, Fatty, we're not even to the anthem yet. The shotgun blast, the sound of 2,000 mountain bikers clipping into their pedals. We'll get into that next week. Of course, as you stand at the start line, as you get ready to roll out, your pockets will be packed with food, with your essential nutrition for that first vital segment, probably down to the pipeline feed area. To do well at any endurance race, you need to train with the nutrition you're going to race with. The feed, one of our great sponsors, is a fantastic, convenient, and economical way to get what you need on an ongoing basis.
That's right. I use the feed for all of the food that I train with and that I race with. I use it to get my Goo Roctane gels, my pre-race starting line bonk breaker bar that I was talking about just a second ago, as well as the secret weapon that Jonathan Vaughters sent me right before the race last year, the Martin's Drink Mix, Maurtens. It is an unusual drink that does some amazing things. I had a great result last year. I don't know how much of a part that played, but I didn't have a bad stomach the whole day, and that counts for a lot. The Feed is a really great partner. Super happy to have them on the podcast.
Thefeed.com is where you can find out more. I love the easy websites. If not, go to Leadville100podcast.com. You can find a link there as well.
It is your women's champion, Rebecca Rusch from Ketchum, Idaho. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Okay, Fatty, I'm ready to hear from the one and only Queen of Pain.
Thanks, Hottie. Nobody knows and teaches endurance racing like four-time Leadville 100 winner Rebecca Rusch. And you can learn from her the way my wife and I did at Rusch Academy. A little plug for her there. There's a gravel version, a mountain bike version, and most importantly, as you are at these, you can ride and learn directly from her. You can learn more about that at RebeccaRusch.com. Hey, Reba, you ready for the first question for the Queen?
I'm ready, and I want to say I'm super stoked to be part of this and people's preparation for Leadville, because it is a magical race, and people have shared their experience with me, my first one, and so I'm really excited to kind of share what I know, my education there, to help other people, maybe you too, Eldon, get a little faster.
Sure, I could stand to be quite a bit faster.
8:12 is pretty good. Yeah, you're doing great.
I am proud of it. And I seriously, I give credit to a lot of different people and great equipment. And I know I worked hard, but some of your tips made a big difference. So let's talk about some of those right now. And this is question number 1. We're just going to ask 3. The most important thing you can do while training to be faster on race day.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I'd love to tell everyone who's busy that there's a magic pill, but the bottom line really is you have to do the training. But my tip for that, and everyone always wishes they could train more, and even as a professional athlete with a coach and all that stuff, I'll let you in on a little secret. I never did 100% of what was on my training plan for Leadville. I did about 80%, and obviously that was good enough for 4 wins. So you do have to put in the work, but you also got to be kind to yourself. So given that people have busy schedules or juggling a lot of things, my rule of thumb with training for anything is no garbage miles. And so what that means is there's basically in your week, there's a few key workouts that you cannot miss. That's your 1 long ride and your 2 days of interval intensity. And so you're either going long and slow, or you're going very short and very fast and intense. And so what I mean by garbage miles are those middle of the road, kind of medium hard, those sort of 2-hour, 3-hour rides where you feel really good. You're with your friends. Maybe you're even dropping your friends. But honestly, those are garbage miles. And they're great to have if you've got all the time in the world for your training. But if you're really trying to maximize your efficiency and you have a family and a job and all these other things, do not miss your 1 long slow ride, and do not miss your intervals. And the thing to think about too with the no garbage miles is you can't make up for lost time. So Don't combine your 1 long slow ride into sort of a long, pretty hard ride, because that's not the purpose of that training. And so having the discipline, if you are a little bit behind the 8 ball, you can't do your intervals and a 2-hour ride in your long ride. You can't pack them all into one. And so stay true to those 2 really most important workouts of the week, 2 really short, hard ones that can be done in 45 minutes. An hour, and 1 long, slow, easy one. And it feels easy, but that long, slow one is actually hard, and training your body in a totally different type of way than the hard ones. So that's my 1 tip for training: no garbage miles, and keep those key workouts.
It's easy to turn one kind of ride into another. Your long, slow miles ride turns into something where you start ramping it up, or you see someone ahead and you want to chase them down, and you just can't help yourself. You got to be disciplined about it, right? And I think that's a part of the eliminating the garbage miles piece of it. So,
and it's a great reason to have a coach. I mean, it's hard to trust sometimes that the work you need to do isn't necessarily feeling like you're going harder. And that's those long, slow ones are where we all get into that danger zone if we feel like, well, if long and slow is pretty good, long and kind of medium is probably even better, and that's just not the case.
Yep, it's true. It is true. Okay, second question. In the days leading up to the race, the time that we call the taper time, if that is something that you do, what is the most important thing you can do in those last few days leading up to the race?
The most important thing you can do is rest. And this is very, very hard for people who've trained their whole year and they're super motivated. You're chomping at the bit. You are like a horse kicking down the stall, because at this point you've dropped your intensity, you've dropped your mileage and time for the week, and your body's doing exactly what it should be doing, which is just raring to go. And you want to save that feeling for race day. And what my coach said to me one year when I was, experiencing the taper and I just wanted to go. And what he said to me the 2 weeks out before the race, he said, and I wanted to cram in one more workout or one more interval workout. And he said to me the 2 weeks before the race, the only thing you can do at this point is blow it, completely blow it. And that really hit home with me because I thought of all that year of training, all that work I've done. And then if I'm going to just go blow it because I'm going to squeeze in one more interval workout and not be as rested as I can be for race day, that really hit home with me. So the only thing you can do 2 weeks out is blow it. So you need to rest, you need to trust your training. And even if you didn't do all the training you wanted to do, it's too late. Don't cram it in. Go to the start line just like a horse kicking down the stall, ready to go.
I like it. I'm going to make Lisa listen to that 3 or 5 times. So final question, what is the most important thing you can do during the race to be faster?
This one is an easy one. The most important thing you can do during the race is start slowly. Start slower than you think you should. Every year, I was never in the lead all the years I won. And I even had somebody ask me, why do you start so slowly? And at the finish line, after I was in front of this person, I just said, well, why do you finish so slowly? Leadville is a very unique race. And even if you've raced a lot of 100-milers, the fact that you start at 10,000 feet with thousands of other people, being at that elevation, if you go out too hot, you get into the red zone too soon, you just can't recover and come back from it. And it's hard enough to keep yourself back at the beginning of a race. You've tapered well, you're that horse kicking down the stall. But for the most part, I think people start too fast in Leadville and they pay for it later. And then they're trying to play catch up with nutrition, with, lactate building up in their muscles that they can't recover at 10,000, 11,000 feet. And so starting slowly is another one of those discipline things. Each of these answers we've talked about require discipline.
They do.
And require trusting something that isn't what your natural habitat would be to run out of the gate. So all three of these things follow a common theme of patience and trusting that the actual science behind this does work.
Oh, they really do.
Starting slowly. Start slow, finish fast.
That's right.
A lot better than the other way around.
Don't be a Roman candle. Those don't last long. Reba, thanks so much for answering this episode of Questions for the Queen.
My honor. It was great. Thanks, Patty.
If you've got questions for the Queen, leave us a comment at Leadville100podcast.com. Tweet with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or just call or text us at 719-453-1514. Note to self, Fatty, no garbage miles, writing that down. And I like this one, no need to do 100% of my training plan. So 2 notes that I put down for self.
Oh, and the don't be a Roman candle is the big one for me. I get so much adrenaline when that shotgun blast goes off. I want to just fly up St. Kevin's. And we will talk about that more in one of the episodes of the course. But boy, so much wisdom coming from the Queen of Pain. And she has so much more. So check out her Rusch Academy at Rebecca, or her Rebecca's Private Idaho events at RebeccaRusch.com. Bear in mind there is a C in Rusch, R-U-S-C-H. So Reba is a true mentor. I think you and I have both learned what we needed to in order to get that sub-9 at Leadville. And she can take time off of practically anyone's race. She sees the things that you need to do to be a little faster without necessarily being any more fit.
Mm-hmm. Fatty, if you were to go into my garage, you'd find a basket out there. And it is full of bike seat packs. I can't decide what the right pack is. I struggle with this all the time, which is why I'm glad you're about to introduce another sponsor to us.
That's right. That is Banjo Brothers, banjobrothers.com. I have been riding with their seat packs for close to 15 years now, I believe. They were the first sponsor when I launched fatcyclist.com. They stuck with me, I think, through most, if not all, of the life of that blog. And I still have Banjo Brothers bags on every single one of my bikes, and I have had a Banjo Brothers seat pack on all of my bikes for, I think, each Leadville for the last 12 years or more. They are simple, good, sturdy bags designed and made in Minneapolis. They've been in business since 2003. The Banjo Brothers is actually, I think, just one guy. Local, strong, good rider, good guy. Banjo Brothers definitely a company worth checking out. I guarantee I will have a Banjo Brothers seat bag on my bike again this year.
That's a lot of rattling around without losing a seat pack, which is important. You don't want to lose the pack as you're bombing down Columbine. So hats off to Banjo for hanging on to your seat rails for all those years. Tough, practical, affordable, Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003. That's banjobrothers.com. Thanks for supporting this Leadville 100 podcast.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. Hottie, tell me this. Can you remember the first time, by which I mean, of course, the first time you trained for the Leadville 100?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember. My approach was a lot of road. I rode tons of road bike, big miles, long days, lots of climbing. And then on Sundays would throw in a 2 to 3 hour mountain bike ride. It worked fine. I got in great shape, got really thin. I had no problem with endurance at Leadville Trail 100. I was climbing well at Leadville. I just wish I'd ridden the mountain bike a little bit more, kind of traded some of those road miles for more mountain bike miles.
Yeah. So what was going on in your head while you were doing all that training? What were you thinking about?
That I gotta ride my bike as much as possible if I expect to ever make it around or that make it through that out and back course.
Yep. So the Hammer, my wife, Lisa, and I were on our long ride last Sunday, and I was asking her about, what is the most important thing I could talk about on this first episode of the podcast, and we kind of got around to what was in our head, or her head, the first time she did the Leadville 100. And she said that the first year she was training for the race, all she could think about was whether she would be able to finish. And I knew instantly that was it. That is the big question. Sure, there are people up front who are hyper experienced in this kind of thing, and they're wondering about how fast they're going to be. But for most of us, the thing racing through our every waking thought ever since we got the acceptance email is, will I be able to cross the finish line in time? And that's the draw to the race. That is, honestly, that is the terror of the race.
Yeah, all those questions you have about fitness and altitude and endurance and everything. I think we can both say that the questions don't go away, whether it be your first time or your fifth time. There's always a little bit of doubt rotating in your head. And kind of the trick is, can you get over that doubt? Can you use your training to help you get over that doubt?
Yeah. And the thing is, even after 21 times, I still have that question in my head. But the thing is, when you finish the race, it is transformational. Ken Chlouber, the founder of the race, is famous for his pre-race motivation. And it occurred to me that the message he has is one worth hearing months before the race, not just the night before. What is the message you would have for people who are wondering, can I finish this race?
Let me just back up just a little bit. The reason for the race to begin with, I was an underground shift boss at the Climax Mine and went to work one swing shift and getting ready to go underground. My crew's getting ready. I got a call from the mine manager, wanted all the shift bosses to come up to his office. We jumped in our pickups, ran up there, and he said, "Boys, we're closing the mine down. Go back, tell your crews to go home. Their unions will be in contact with them tomorrow. You can go home. Management will be in contact with you." That was devastating for Leadville. We lost 3,200 jobs in a community of 5,000. So the Leadville race, in its genesis, was to support and recover the economic vitality of this community, to bring money into the community, bring athletes in to run 100 miles at 10,000 feet. What we've discovered over the years is as it went along, and you've heard me say this because you've been to the races yourself so many times. You're better than you think you are. You can do more than you think you can. That I learned. It's not just something cute to say. I learned repeatedly doing the race myself, and then watching people do the race. And people that you would think, if you looked at them individually, you'd think, buddy, you're never going to finish this 100-mile run, or you're never going to finish this 100-mile bike. But something inside them knew that they could finish the race. So getting back to your point, people's question, can I finish this race? Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no reason not to finish this race, because we know, because we've proved it so many times, we've seen it repeatedly over and over, that inside each and every one of us, inside is an inexhaustible well of grit, guts, and determination. Is when you reach that point in the race, and you will, and you'll reach it repeatedly, and you'll think, what am I doing here? This hurts too bad, too much, there's no reason for me to do that. Yet they find a way. Those that will reach down into that inexhaustible well, grit, guts, and determination, they'll go on, and they'll finish that race. What that does for them, and what we've discovered, is that has a life-changing effect. If you come here and you will dig deep, you'll go to the next aid station, and you finish that race, that will add a new dimension to your life, that you'll know when you run into problems with your job, with your family, you know that the power is within you if you just don't quit. So, yeah, that's the message I'd like to give to everybody who's listening to your broadcast, Eldon, that, yeah, you betcha you can finish this race. You just don't quit.
Ken, you're an inspiration. It is always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks, Eldon. My pleasure. An honor. Thank you.
Another thing, Fatty, too, I think trust. You have to, for folks who have trained and trained properly for the race, if they just trust, and I know trusting yourself and trusting what other people have told you is a difficult leap to make, but if you trust your training and race your race, you're going to be able to get through this. Note about Ken, too. I mean, Ken gives this speech, and the cynical guy out there, I'm like, oh, it's this hokey guy with his grits, guts, determination. You're better than you think you are stuff. But what Ken has really done here, more than just have this speech and create this race, is he's created this energy. And the energy, too, that's the other thing that will help you get through this race. You'll be surprised by it. You'll get to the town. All of a sudden, you got all these people welcoming you. They don't know you, right? You're the stranger in their town. They're very, very welcoming. They are going to help you. The locals, the people who are not in the race, the people who are standing on, they help you get through the race.
Yep.
There's this amazing energy about this race that's going to help you get through it. A lot of people want to see you make it, not just you. There's a lot of people standing on the sidelines that really and truly want to see you make it.
Yep. And Ken is the real deal. He's never done the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, but he has done the Leadville 100 running race multiple times. So he is a genuine athlete, and he knows he knows of what he speaks when he talks about that place where you're like, what am I doing here? You can tell he's asked himself that question. And, the fact is, not everyone's going to finish this race, and sometimes there are good reasons, but I think there are a good chunk of people who don't finish who could finish. And I think that there are a few things you can do to be one of the people who do finish, right? And one of the biggest ones is have all your mental pieces in place. What Ken is really talking about is your why. What am I doing here? so that when you get to that race, to that point in the race where you are suffering, where it is 12,000 feet and you can't even think straight and you are barely able to walk your bike up the hill, much less ride it. And there is a moment like that. I mean, there are multiple moments like that you don't think, I could turn around and coast back to Leadville. You don't do that, right? You've got to have a serious intent. And it needs to be in place and ready for you to access. It's the real grits, guts, determination. There's a reality to it, right?
Yeah, because I can tell you, not having the why is an immediate. The race will spit you out in a second. It spit me out last year because I didn't have a why for being there. It said, "You're pretty much done at Twin Lakes, my friend."
Yeah.
Out, and it does. It rejects anybody who doesn't have purpose.
Yep. If you don't have a why, you do have a why not. And it's easy to go to that. So second thing with that, as while we're talking about will you finish, is have a fallback objective. Things go wrong. Your motivation can't be just finishing in under 12 hours. It can't just be in finishing under 9 hours or whatever your number is. Bear in mind and truly believe, if you're shooting for a sub 9, that 9:15 is also a great time and is a worthy pursuit. So that if you get to the point where you are 85 miles in and you realize sub 9 is just not going to happen, or sub 12 is just not going to happen, that your 12 and a half hours is still great. That sub 13 is still amazing, and there will be a lot of people cheering for you, and a finisher's medal for the people who finish for pride at 12 hours and 55 minutes.
I can tell you from experience, having a time is also very important. I probably would have done much better my first time out had I been more definitive about my time. I did put a sub 10 hour split on my top tube and a sub 9, but I wasn't committed to one or the other. Yeah. And it got me. I ended up with what I deserved, which is probably not the time I was. The fitness I brought to that race was much better than the time I posted.
Yeah. So next thing, and this one might be more for people like me than for the people who are rail thin, but lose some of the weight. If you have weight that you can lose, it is time to do that now. Once you get to within a month of the race, it's probably a little too late to do that. But I have always kind of used the yardstick of a pound is worth 5 minutes. If you can lose 5 pounds, that's good for 25 minutes. And there isn't a one-to-one match, but definitely every pound that you are carrying up above 10,000 feet, you really do feel it. And on the big climbs, up Sugarloaf, up St. Kevin's, up Columbine, up Power Line in particular, right? It slows you down and it wears you out. If you can lose a little of that weight now, you will be grateful for it. If you every pound that you carry that you don't need to up those big climbs, you will feel them as well, right? Nutrition. I think this is probably the most important thing. The most important thing that can end your race. Be a bad gut seems more likely by far to end your race than a crash. And it is hard to chew at 10,000 feet. You know about that, Hottie, right?
Eating is, I've always loved your quote, Fatty. This is an eating and drinking competition by Bill Trail 100. You got to keep it going down your throat somehow.
It is. And I'm serious about, eating dry food, very hard. Eating chews, very hard. There is a reason why my time dropped by about an hour when I started training exclusively with gels and got so that I could tolerate them very well. I'm a big fan of Goo Roctane. I make no secret of it. They are not a sponsor. I don't care. I still use them, right? Whatever gel you use, gel is a very good solution for this kind of race. Know what the bugaboos are for this race. Your good friend Sean, he has 11,500 feet, and it's like someone turns off the lights for him. For me, it's a little bit higher. It's around 11.8. But everyone has a point where suddenly they find they have no power in this race due to altitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, find that spot, identify it, and know how to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it is there, have a plan about how you're going to approach 11,800 feet and above.
Yeah.
Because you could lose all kinds of time up there at the turnaround at Columbine.
And the solution is really pretty easy for me. I just acknowledge my shoulder, or acknowledge it, shrug my shoulders, and just kind of laugh it off. I'm up there. There's no oxygen. Once I'm past my granny gear, all I can do is walk. And you just tell yourself, you know what? It isn't me. I'm not ruined. This race isn't over. This is just what happens at this race, at this altitude, to everyone. Look around. Everybody is suffering the exact same way that you are. Mm-hmm. And finally, and this one was a point that Reba made, and I think it is worth underscoring and italicizing and shouting from the rooftops, don't burn your matches too early. It is so easy to go nuts on St. Kevin's and Sugarloaf and have nothing left by the time you get to mile 60. Keep something in reserve because the final climbs are so hard no matter what. The power line is, in my opinion, the real test of the race. Everyone thinks that Columbine is, but power line is just so much harder because you've gone so much farther.
Mm-hmm. That race begins. The Leadville Trail 100 begins when you take your pipeline feed coming home.
Yeah.
That's it, folks. You're trying to get there and then start racing.
That is the truth.
And that's what, 2/3 through.
Yep, that's
you're
around.
2/3 mileage-wise. You're 2/3 done there. But that is the toughest section right there.
Closer to 3/4. You're at around mile 75 when you get to the pipeline aid station on the way back. So, yeah, and that is where the real effort begins. Final thoughts on this one is Ken is right. You are better than you think you are, and you can do more than you think you can, and you got to go into that dark place. It sounds cheesy until you discover it's true, and then it changes you entirely. That's the magic of this race. Now, sort of kind of changing gears for a second, I want to talk about one of our sponsors, and it's Envy, ENVE for a second, not the Vice, the Wheels company. It kind of ties back to this can you finish question, though, because I know a guy who is registered for Leadville 100 for the Leadville 100 race 5 times, but he has never finished the race. And he's actually my brother-in-law. Sorry for outing you in a podcast, Rocky. He's just had outrageously bad luck in a number of different ways. He's had DNFs for a million different reasons. His saddest one, though, happened his second try, coming down Sugarloaf about 85 miles into the race. His handlebar broke. He went over what was left of his mangled handlebar, and his race was over.
Yeah, the lesson in all cases with mountain bike racing, especially, is don't buy cheap equipment. The very specific lesson here is Envy makes the toughest, lightest, most bomb-proof cockpits around. And the last thing you want is to come rattling down Sugarloaf, which is quite bumpy, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
That's a nasty way to wrap up what's been a very hard day. It's coming down Sugarloaf. You will swear your whole bike's going to come flying apart at any second. Where your hands are touching that bicycle, very important.
Absolutely.
That new M5 mountain handlebar is really as close to a must-have item for any XC racer. Again, it's light. Got a little sweep to it, just the right amount. And, of course, they are sturdy. They're bomb-proof.
Oh, they are. I have never, ever had an Envy bar break or crack. And the predecessor to the M5, which was the Envy Sweep bar, it's the only bar I've ever had on any of my bikes for about half a decade.
Check out the M5 bar and the rest of the M-Series cockpit lineup over at envy.com. All right, Fatty, let's get some training tips now with Trainer Road's coach, Jonathan Lee.
Yeah, do you listen to the Trainer Road podcast, Hottie?
Absolutely. Those guys are giving out free training information. I absorb that stuff on all my long rides. They're in my ears talking about, threshold power and their sweet spot base. And, yeah, I'm hip to all their lingo.
I am a fan myself. I use Trainer Road, the program, pretty religiously, and I don't miss an episode of their Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. Jonathan Lee is one of the hosts of the show, and he is incredibly knowledgeable. He's a data super nerd, and he's working to qualify into the Leadville 100 this year. So I thought it would be very interesting to bring him on each week for a check-in on how your training ought to be going. Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks, Eldon. Happy to be here.
Let's get a little bit of an overview. We are at T-minus 12 weeks between now and race day. What should they be doing?
In most cases, what you need a lot of time to train every week. Then you also need a lot of lead time before your race. Another way to do it is to go about what they call kind of hovering in a sweet spot zone. And that sweet spot is usually like, somewhere in high 80s in terms of percentage of your threshold. So it's below that line where you feel like your muscles, if you go any further, your muscles are going to load up and you're going to just become a big ball of lactic acid and blow up. It's just below that, but it's hard, almost just as hard. It's an uncomfortable place to ride. And that's called sweet spot training. And what happens with sweet spot training is that with greater intensity to a certain respect or to a certain point, you can bring about a greater or a higher concentration of aerobic conditioning that you're after. So you don't need quite as much time at a lower intensity. You can increase that intensity to a certain point, and you can then get more benefit for less time, so to speak. So that's what usually most of us do is that sort of sweet spot approach. At least most of us average folks like that are listening to this. I'm sure that there are people that have 12 hours to train and they can, or more than that, and they can do more. But I usually take that sweet spot approach. And the reason that I explain that really quick is because it's important to set your expectations based on what you have done so far. So if you've been out chasing Strava segments, racing every once in a while, maybe doing some long rides on the weekends, chances are you have some aerobic conditioning, but you're not going to actually, it's not something that's really, really high quality. So you just have to be realistic with yourself, and then that way you can get the proper type of training that you're going to need. If you've been really diligent and sticking to something like, this will be a plug, but, Trainer Road has sweet spot-based training plans, right, that are very specific, so then you can follow those, and you can make sure, you can have absolutely, zero question that those boxes are checked. If that's the case, then you can really go into this next bit of training with a lot of confidence. So let's assume that's done. That was a long answer on what was done, but we haven't even gotten to your question. What should they be doing moving forward? And in terms of what you should be doing moving forward, Leadville is a lot of sustained climbing, and you need to work on increasing your ability to sustain power, but also your ability to sustain high amounts of power.
That's right.
A higher threshold is honestly a good cure for a lot of problems for bike racers or just bike riders in general. So really, you'd be using or going into a phase of training that we usually refer to as the build phase. And it's the type of stuff where we're putting you strategically either at threshold or above threshold for specific periods of time, and then we look to extend that. So we either do that by shrinking the amount of rest in between intervals or making them slightly longer, or maybe taking sets of intervals and moving them closer together and maybe squeezing in an extra one as time progresses. But you really want to make sure that you are familiar with threshold type of efforts that are going to be really hard, because on race day at Leadville, you will not be riding at threshold, or else you would finish terribly. It's way too long for that. But
I have done that before, and it is only good to get you to the first aid station.
True story, especially at elevation. So, but the point is, when you train that threshold training, right, and that fitness, what you're doing is you're effectively raising your tide. So that effort that you'll be riding at on race day will be, it'll feel the same as when you're slow, so to speak. In an ideal world, you'd be able to just, maintain the same percentage of your threshold. But as your threshold rises, that means that you're actually putting out more power, which means you're going faster on the bike. So that's what you should really be focusing on. You don't need to worry about throwing punches like cyclocross style training, where it's like on, off, on, off. It's a lot of sustained work.
So let's bottom line it for me here, Jonathan. What should people be working on right now if they are a little bit behind and want to sort of get caught up before the race day? And then what should they be working on if they have already been doing their base training and have a good aerobic fitness?
If you're a little behind the curve, I recommend starting in that sweet spot zone and then slowly working up the duration at which you're at that sweet spot zone. You can do this with a heart rate monitor, but that's a little tricky. You can do it with a rate of perceived exertion. That can be tricky. A power meter is great, but they are expensive. But you can also do it just with that perception. Just ride it where you feel like any further and I'm going to pop. Ride there for, do it for 8 minutes. And then after that, the next, and then repeat that 3 or 4 times. Then the next week, you're going to want to stretch that to maybe 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, or maybe just shrink the rest. And you're just going to try to systematically, step that up. So you're spending more time around there. And then you'll eventually get into threshold territory. But if you're already caught up, that's where I recommend you start, is making sure that you're putting in time at threshold. So intervals that are, lengthy. You can start out short in terms of, riding, once again, around 8 minutes or so, even shorter at threshold. But you're really going to want to extend those so that you can get into race day and be familiar with sustained efforts.
I will say that I think it was in 2015 when I first used Trainer Road, and that is the year that I got my fastest time at Leadville, 8:12.
There you go. That's how it works.
Yeah, it does. It makes a difference. I got religion about it. So does Lisa. You already know that. So
True.
You didn't plug your company so hard, so I will for you.
Awesome.
Once again, Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad.com and the Mountain Bike Podcast, both of them great podcasts. Thanks so much, Jonathan. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Eldon. Chat soon.
One more time, check out trainerroad.com for in-depth training plans and info, and you'll find their podcast there too, which that's where I go. That's where I get a lot of my Jonathan Lee information.
Absolutely. Him and the rest of the Trainer Road crew are the most lovable cycling super nerds in the whole damn world. Glad to have them on the podcast.
Excellent. Yep. As we put the wraps on this one, Fatty, we'd like to remind everyone that this podcast can be found on the one and only Apple Podcasts. Of course, Google Music, we like to show up there too, and our home website, Leadville100podcast.com. Subscribing, rating, reviewing us on those sites helps keep this podcast alive.
And if you want to slap us around a bit, then head over to the website's comment section and we'll be happy to argue with you to your heart's content. If you've got a question for the Queen or for Jonathan or for us, leave a voicemail or a text at 719-453-1514. And of course, we'll have that phone number on the website itself. Good luck in your training. Check your feed for a new episode next week, and we'll see you at the finish line.